Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a man of many talents. Besides being a freelance production sound mixer, he's also a radio announcer, MC, and voice actor. Please welcome Carl Welden.
Hello out there in audio land.
So, Carl, how's everything going?
I got to say, my life is extraordinary, despite my very best efforts. Sound has been very good to me on, like you were saying, a lot of different levels. And I'm happy that I can be versatile enough that so many avenues can be open to me doing what I love.
Now, Carl, we always like to start off the show by asking, when you're working on location as a sound mixer, what's in your audio bag?
My bag's got Sound Devices 633 and Lectrosonics SRC receiver with a couple of the new SMWB transmitters out there. Just added Comtex to my kit. That's a nice little addition I got going there. I love a little Stingray Junior bag. It's got a nice small footprint, and I'm either in a harness or it's sitting on a cart.
Okay. Now, when it comes to power distribution, what do you usually use?
A little remote audio, BDS.
Okay. When it comes to timecode devices, what do you use?
Generating from the mixer, of course, first, and then keeping everything else going with Deneke. I've got a Smart Slate, the compact one, the TSC, and a couple of the older SB3 sync boxes. They're built like tanks. You can run over them with a golf cart. It puts a little more weight on your camera operator's shoulder if it's living on their shoulder, but they're rock solid. I've forgotten to jam through lunch, and they've kept time all day.
Okay, great. And what shotgun mic did you say you had?
For shotgun, the Sennheiser 416, I am gearing up to get a Sheps. That's in the near future. And then for interiors, MKH50, super cardioid.
All right, excellent. Regarding location sound, what are the main audio projects that you usually work on?
Most of the work I'm doing has been on a lot of documentary shoots, a little bit of ENG, a few short films. I'm more of a day player. Got, a family life and other work outside of location sound, doing live sound. So committing to a month on a feature has, not been as accessible to me as I'd like. So a lot of, sometimes it's run and gun, and sometimes it's doing something, small and independent. And I'd like to be able to say yes to whatever comes my way. The more I can say yes to things, the more options I can provide, then, whatever variety comes my way, I can try and get under my belt.
Now, you're a family man, so how do you juggle your jobs and family?
I took my son on a shoot recently, so the juggling, I got to drop one ball and actually bring it along with me. Most of the time, the kids they're a little older now, but they like what I do. My kids know what an XLR cable is since kindergarten, and would correct other kids when they were doing school plays. So they appreciate my world a bit. But as far as juggling family life goes, if I'm out of town for a night or so, it's good. But if I'm away for a week or longer, then it does definitely take a toll. A lot of show business families definitely feel the strain of crazy production hours and schedules and such. So it is a juggling act. It's a balancing act. It's as much planning as you can put in and cooperation all around. The better.
Now, I was looking at your past productions that you worked on, and one of them was Nick and Nikki, and it was a comedy where you were the sound recordist. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like on set?
Mick and Mickey. Yeah, they needed a sound guy for one day out in a remote area. I guess they had shot most of it in Florida and came up to the Catskills, where I'm located, to do one day in an old Catskills resort, and came on board and I just hit the ground running. I kind of jumped into the frying pan with, I didn't know anyone on the crew. It was none of my people. They were all from somewhere else. It was a difficult location. It was a lounge with lots of mirrors on the wall where, hiding a boom was near impossible. And the lavs were being crippled by wardrobe picking noisy outfits. And, but if it's easy, you don't learn anything. If you are thrown lots of challenges, you are gaining skills. With every frustration, you find a way of making it work. And then, the headache of the day becomes a tool you can use on every gig thereafter.
That's good. Another one of your past productions was called Last July, and it was a kind of a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. It was, doing a shoot for a friend. I have yet to see any of the footage from it, and it's a few years gone by now, and I still keep in touch with crew members from it. It was shot in July, and it's supposed to be, in the future, an apocalypse. And if anyone's ever worked on any dystopian, narrative pieces, that you're not supposed to be hearing cars and conversations and airplanes because none of those things are supposed to be existing. And of course, we find a location and it turns out to be near a skydiving ranch and there's planes flying overhead all day, followed by people going, yeah, woo, and people coming down on parachutes. Sometimes, just hit record and cross your fingers. And other times you just say, did you really check out the location and the calendar? Do you know what's going on in the area we're going to be shooting in? There's nothing like asking a crowd of extras for wild lines and saying, I want all of you to give your best zombie groans and growls and stuff. And, it's the kind of stuff that gives you little goosebumps just to say, wow, I'm getting some good sound today. Those little rewards, those little wins you can tuck away and smile about later on.
Yes. For those people getting started, from your experience, would you recommend renting gear or buying?
I decided to buy and own outright, and that way I didn't have to. There's no real rental house options. I'm up in the mid-Hudson Valley area, up in the Catskills. For anyone anywhere else on the planet, I could just say it's near Woodstock, and they seem to get a general idea of where I am.
Okay.
The city means, an hour or two's drive to get to, a proper rental house. So for me, the best option was to buy things outright. I would buy secondhand wherever possible from people I trusted that I knew had reliable gear, or I wasn't buying things on eBay that had a high likelihood of being cloned or counterfeit items. Sennheiser 416s are all over eBay and they look like they're a great deal, and it's because they're often not real. To rent equipment, I'm putting money in someone else's pocket, whereas if I own the equipment, I can be charging production to, rent it out to them. Buying everything that I can afford, buying the best I can afford, rather than, getting things on credit and having to pay for it a long time. I mean, I could have bought a really expensive kit to start with and been paying for it for a long time, or doing small things until I had enough to get what I really needed to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what would be your philosophy on being over-prepared?
You can plan all you want, and something different will always happen. Having readiness to deal with multiple situations, even when a simple setup is called for, has always been a good practice. Simple does not mean easy. You can come off as a total hero because you have one little connector or adapter in your kit that you thought of that saves the day sometimes. You can get all the, none of the credit if it goes right and all the blame if it goes wrong otherwise.
Right.
I hate to have to carry a lot of stuff with me. I like to travel light, and that's the nice thing about location. If you're moving around a lot, but sometimes having these little tools and lifesavers and extra odds and ends, again, they make the job easier. And using my own kit versus renting, back to that, if I'm using my own stuff, it's stuff I'm familiar with that I can have a faster workflow with versus renting something I've never used before. I would rent it maybe to learn, but I need to be able to count on it and know all its parameters. I'd be trepidatious about, using something for the first time on day one of a shoot. Of course, there's always something I'd like to get my hands on. I'd love to try a new device here and there and see how it works. So if I don't know another person who's got one that I could try out, I'm tempted to say, hey, can I, rent this just to, see what it's about.
Right. What was your biggest technical challenge on set?
I mean, the biggest challenges as a location sound guy, is if you're not in a controlled environment like a sound stage or studio, when you're out on location, you are, vulnerable to the elements in a sense that, sound is this invisible problem that can, you can't just frame it out like a camera. You can't, point at just the subject and not see everything else. Sound comes in from all over the place. So, I mean, of course, the obvious, trains, planes, and automobiles. The challenges of your lawn maintenance mowers and weed whackers, your barking dogs, your air conditioning units that click on, your refrigerators that keep coming on, your noisy furnaces, your quartz clocks that make a click every second, people who forgot to turn the phones off in their home. Every once in a while, there's just all these things. You can go over a location again and again and again and hope that they is an interdepartmental cooperation, that they will consider sound when looking at a place, not just for how it'll look on camera, but for how that environment will sound. We always, beg and ask and try and teach and, try and get that consideration. Yes, you've got a lovely home on a beautiful vista, but did you notice there's a children's playground next door?
Right.
It's out of your shot, but that sound travels. You can't isolate it. As far as challenges on set, once that stuff happens and there's things beyond my control, what can I do to fix it? What can I do to get as close to the person speaking to just get as much dialogue and hope that it can be tamed by the miracle workers in post-production who make us look good.
Yes.
There's that. But challenges on set, if it's human error or incompatible gear, or sometimes the biggest challenge is simply communication. Not having the vocabulary to, if someone is asking something of you and they're not exactly sure how you can make it happen for them, but you speak a little bit of camera and camera speaks a little bit of sound and you get along okay, and it goes smoother. But sometimes it's just getting along with people. Sometimes the difficulties are very human oriented.
And that's true. It's like we can have all the great gear, but if you can't communicate or you have an issue with certain people, that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I can bring $10,000 or $20,000 worth of equipment, but if the director wants to do day for night in a place where you're hearing birdsong all the time, I can't yell at them, but I can calmly tell them, okay, I'm going to do what you've asked me to do, but you are going to have this issue. I'm not going to be glib about it and say, hey, it's not my problem. I have to say it's my responsibility to make them aware. These are the limitations, we have because of science and physics. Not that I can't do something. I don't want to fall down on my knees and cry and say, you're asking the impossible. I will say I will do the best I can to the utmost of my ability to try and do, the best I can for this production, because my name's going on it. I want it to be as good as possible.
Absolutely. Out of all the productions you've worked on over the years, is there one that stands out being your favorite?
I've had ones that were unusual and became things that I get to tell stories about later. Being asked to record a Belgian and art troupe. They were performance artists in the Dia Museum. They basically moved around a space and made unusual noises and interacted with their environment. There was no dialogue. It was, just capturing the noise. And on the second day, they said, we're going to bring in 3 fire trucks and we're going to conduct a symphony of sirens, horns, and their engine noises. And we want you to record that. And I had just gotten a set of remote audios, HN7506, if you're not familiar. It's the 7506 headphone inside of aviation headsets. So
the white ones?
They're white ones. Yep, you can spot them a mile away. And I was so glad I had them. It was, being in a super loud working environment and still having to monitor what you're capturing. And they started this cacophonous noise, and about a minute into what we were doing, the fire department got a call and had to leave. Of course.
And the nice part, you weren't deaf because you had some great headphones.
Yeah. If I can introduce a topic, taking care of yourself, taking care of your ears. Just as a camera operator shouldn't watch someone while they're welding, or no one should for that matter, because it'll destroy their retinas. You have to think in the long term about your hearing. Sure, everybody loves a rock and roll concert, but saving your hearing so that you can still hear frequencies and details for recording. The idea of, using hearing protection is a lot more economical than having to get hearing aids later and not being able to be a location sound recordist because you can no longer hear the subject matter you're working with, that you're no longer able to perceive the medium you're trying to capture. That's a scary prospect.
Always good to have some earplugs in your pocket. I remember, I think I was in high school, and I went and I saw Van Halen in concert, and my ears rang for 3 days. And I'm just like, now I was a kid at the time, but you look back and go, oh my gosh, what damage was done there? It was so loud, your ears were just distorting. And you do that on a regular basis, you have some long-term hearing damage.
Well, I do live sound as well. Nothing humongous, just a mixer that'll fit into a rack space and a snake and some main speakers and some monitor wedges for the band. But I mix in a way that that I want to hear it. I mix for transparency. I want everybody to be able to hear what's being played, but not be assaulted by sound. That they can perceive every instrument in detail. That the mix is good. The mix is more important than the volume. And of course, you get too loud, you get ordnance complaints. But this idea of mixing for transparency and live sound, that you are sound reinforcement rather than weaponized sound, making sound that will blow you away. I mean, me, I'm doing local festivals and occasional backyard parties and corporate events where everyone's sitting at a table with a name tag in front of them and a desk mic and then I can be a value-added service. Hey, do you want me to hit record on this and capture sound from this event?
Okay. Now, you don't have to mention any names, but what was your worst on-set experience?
I think, worst day on set sometimes is just, being sold one bill of goods and it turns out to be something else where, the hours go much longer than you're asked for. They're demanding more of you than you came prepared for. And the budget won't accommodate, and someone outright lets you know that they have a hard time dealing with, sound department, like they just have some personal grudge against, people who work with microphones. I've encountered that. I didn't think I would. I was like, aren't we all trying to cooperate and make a good thing here? But, you later find out that, so-and-so director goes through sound people like water,
Wow.
that it's not me, that they actually don't like sound people. And I'm like, really? They have to work with them. It's nothing you can be prepared for, but if you can say, okay, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to try and be professional and move on and recover from it. Bad days on set are better than your best day in an office is a phrase people will go back to. And, and I can agree, like I'm still enjoying myself for what I'm doing. But if there's difficulties from external sources and troubles that are hitting me left and right that I have no control over, I can either decide to, toughen up and carry on, or I can, let it eat me up and think, oh, I should just pack it in and stop my career doing this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to learn from it and, and carry on.
We always like to be prepared, but did you ever forget any equipment that you really needed when you were on a gig?
In radio, we have what are called dead air dreams, where you have this reoccurring nightmare that no signal is going out. And you wake up from it, of course, and everything's okay. Now, when it starts happening in reality, you show up on set, you unpack your cases, and a component is missing. I came to do a musician's interview, and they just wanted 2 boom mics. I grabbed a case. I got to the location, I opened the case, and there's no microphone in it. Oh. I quietly, took a deep breath. I let my heart rate slow down. I talked to my good friend who's the DP, and I say, please tell me you brought an extra mic for scratch track or something like that. And sure enough, he had a shotgun mic in his kit that he hadn't planned on using because I was gonna run him cables anyway. And I had a second boom available and salvaged it. And it turned out that I had loaned the mic to a musician for a recording session, but for a good couple of weeks, I thought, what did I do? Did it get stolen? Did it get left on the hood and roof of my car? Did I, leave it in some other kit? And it turned out that it was just, at my neighbor's house. Now it's, double and triple checking my cases before going out and, having a checklist. What am I bringing? What do I need? But I've shared stories about, the dreams of you're forgetting something. And people think, oh, yes, I've had that dream. And I've also had the reality where they leave a hotel and their boom pole was behind the hotel room door and they don't realize it until they're, already on the train to location. What do? They run to the home center and grab a painter's pole, or do they, try and get a runner to go back and get it for them,
So regarding expendables you like to use on set, which ones?
Expendables for me, I've kind of cut down on. Most of the expendables were batteries for the beginning of my career. And I thought, I'm tired of having all these half-used batteries. My kids only have enough toys that I can give them used batteries to run. So switching over to rechargeables was a feel-good, a responsible thing to do, and an economical switch. So, having an expendable be reusable as instead of expendable was good. Always having some gaff tape and having some 3M transport hypoallergenic tape for taping on labs, are mostly what I have. I don't have what are sometimes referred to as suicide mics that are cheap enough that, if they get destroyed, it's okay. If you're planting a mic in a burning building, I guess you'd use something like that. So, those are high-end expendables, I suppose, but I haven't had to go that route for anything. There's an old joke. What do you call a sound guy with gaff tape? Thief. Yeah.
I had not heard that one. That's a good one.
Yeah. I often get asked by other departments, do you have any tape? Do you have any extra batteries? Do you have any, dry erase markers, zip ties, bungee
Velcro.
cords, Velcro bungee cords. I like the little, instead of bongo ties, I like these ones they use for setting up party tents. It's an elastic band with a ball at the end, sort of a, just a single, ball version of like the child's hair braid, but made of a thick shock cord.
Right, I've seen those.
Perfectly goes around a boom pole or through the D-rings on my bag, or I can, wrap a sync box onto something if there's no Velcro option. And it's just good for everything, cable management and whatever else. Zip ties, I have them handy, but, once you put a zip tie on something, you have to be able to cut it off later. And if you have to move things multiple times, it's not always the best option.
When you're hiding microphones and lav mics, do you use any particular expendable there?
I like the 3M transport. You can, because it's available in so many places. You can get it in every drugstore. That it's hypoallergenic, that it's porous, so the talent's skin can breathe. That it's not as gluey as some other tapes. It's clear, so it won't make a white patch like bandage tapes do. If someone has, a sheer, fabric that can kind of be seen through or anything, if I'm using a lot of it. It tears easy because it's porous, so you don't need scissors to cut it into pieces. It's much more skin friendly than, see someone throwing gaff tape on an actor. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Right. Yeah, especially on skin, which if they get hot, doesn't stick anywhere anyway.
You'll have a little glue on your wire or on your, your hush mounts or things like that. Before I pack them up, I usually have a little container of cornstarch or baby powder, and I'll sprinkle a little in the palm of my hand, and I'll run the cable through it, and the cornstarch will stick to any glue spots, so I can find them later to remove them, or at least, keep using the cable and not have it be a sticky cable. As long as somebody's not wearing a black costume, of course.
Right. After the job is done and we back up, how long do you usually keep backups?
I still have backups from years and years ago because I have this dream of one day having all the time in the world to listen to them and pull sounds and one day have a sound library. I don't have a Foley studio or a sound effects collection that I'm hawking off, but wouldn't it be nice if I could? It's not taking up huge amounts of space like keeping video footage would. A lot of my earlier 2-track recording stuff doesn't take up a lot of space on an external hard drive here and there. So,
yes.
But a lot of times, production will say, here, we're using our cards today, and they'll give me an SD card or whatever, and they take it home with them, and I never hear those sounds again. So I don't have to store everything. I have had frantic calls saying, please tell me you have a backup of, the sound from the other day. And, I'll either become a hero and say yes or say, no, you had the only copy. You insisted on using your card. I handed it to you at the end of the shoot. And I said out loud, okay, everyone, look, I'm handing you this card. And,
Right.
and then it turns out that they have it in the cup holder of their van, that they just, taken it out of their pocket and, and stuck it somewhere and forgotten where it was. Or we'll spend, some time on Dropbox or whatever and slowly send each file over remotely.
That's true. A number of the people we've interviewed, they have saved the day multiple times over the years. So critical to have a backup.
If somewhere in the editing process, something goes wrong with their drives or the computer, or they reformat something and it changes the quality, they lose the metadata, and they could sync it all by hand. But if you still have the originals that have that metadata, it can help them out. I try and ask post-production people, what can I do to make your job easier? What are things I can do to think about the next guy? How can I help? And they say, hey, the more information you send us, the better. So I'm trying to accommodate whenever I can. Mostly they want room tone.
Right. That's true. Now, do most of your clients prefer to record audio directly to the camera, or are they okay with a timecode setup, or do they try to sync it in post with something like Pluralize or something like that?
Most of the time it's duplex. I'm recording high quality and I'm sending to camera just so they can sync later. They'll have a scratch track either with an onboard mic of their own, or I've got an ENG snake sending them a mix. I mean, if I'm running 2 channels, they're getting just what I'm getting, but without the quality limiters on a location sound recorder. Camera limiters are often, not as good. So if a hot signal comes through, it might not be able to squash it down, and they'll always have my original audio. Some worry about sending sound to camera because, well, then they've got your files and they don't need your sound and they're not going to pay you. So I just try not to work with sketchy people that might do that. But other times, if time code is good enough and that's what they say, we'll go with, then, they'll be creating a silent film and they'll have my beautiful, pristine, clear audio to play with later. Just, as long as they're remembering to slate, and if there's, I'll always bring 3 slates to set: my smart slate, a dummy slate, and then an insert slate that fits in my pocket that still has a clapper on it. So, something, I took a regular sized, cheap Chinese slate and cut it down to, basically fit into a pocket and still have a clapper on it. And it's been very run and gun friendly.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
It sounds really tiny. It goes click instead of clack, but as long as you can hear it.
Speaking of jobs and trying to get work, do you have any freelance tips?
You'll hear it again and again. It's who you know. You can have, amazing equipment, but, your reputation being everything. Saying yes as much as possible to stay on people's radar. Very often, if it's annual events and things, you want to look on your calendar and know something's coming up and just touch base with them, say, hey, you need me again this year. Trying to get, long-term clients and people who you'll become their go-to. If you can demonstrate an invaluable service you can do, if you go the extra mile, I guess if you show up and do the bare minimum, you're going to be remembered for that. I could take a mercenary attitude and say I'm not going to lift a finger to help out in other things because I'm not getting paid extra, or I can, help make the day go faster, help out a little bit here and there, make things smoother and be remembered as someone who got along with everybody. I don't have to go out of my way to, make friends and please everyone, but I'm willing to be a resource that they can count on. Other tips for freelancers: don't take lowball offers because you'll teach producers that lowball offers are acceptable. If you always concede to working for a very low rate, they'll remember that, and say another mixer is trying to get work for them, they'll say, oh, I know a guy who only does it for this much, and it hurts somebody else too. If you ask for a high rate and they say no, well, that just means you lost on, the low rate they were going to offer you, if they weren't going to do that anyway.
I have a friend that we work with a lot. He's a grip on set, and he was doing some national projects. And what he figured out on set was everybody's got a different deal. And sometimes you're doing the same job, and one guy's making a lot more than you are, and one guy's got overtime, and you don't. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to potentially, keep a lookout for.
Yeah, I recently was asked by a very good friend if I would come up on board for a 2-day, shoot at half of my rate. And I said, well, because I want to work with you, I'll say yes. After we wrapped and it was a grueling shoot and, a bit of a headache, I find out later that they had a higher budget for another sound mixer, and they had it all set to go. And then they put out another call for sound and basically got my friend cheaper and got me cheaper because they finagled something. I don't know. And it hurt. It was it's like, oh, you had more money, and then you kept it, or you put it into something else that we probably didn't need. Not every day is a picnic. If this was easy, everybody would be doing it. If this was easy, you'd have, stadiums full of sound mixers, but it's not. It's a challenge. It's the nice thing about the numbers end of it, though, is that, I'll take the analogy that a guitar is sold every 11 seconds in the United States. There's guitarists everywhere. However, drummers, there's less of them. And who's always working? Drummers. Yeah. So in the same sense, everybody seems to have a camera now. I mean, there are so many videographers. How many people are specializing in location sound? Not as many. So freelancers, you should be dictating the rates, not them. You are the hot commodity. You are the harder thing to find. And if more sound mixers can agree on a proper rate, a higher compensation, with overtime, with gear rental, the all-ins, we take them once in a while if it's worth it, but trying to teach, trying to educate production, this is what we're worth. It does work. Whether you're union or non-union, there's a lot to be gleaned from talking to each other. That, other sound mixers aren't your competitors. They've got your back. If you need someone to cover you for a gig, think of it as a community, as a family. It's a very small world, and the film world is even smaller, and we all know each other and we all talk to each other. If someone is out there taking the job for $200 that we would normally get $600 to $800 for, we find out about it, and it's, the first thing we'll do is say, hey, we want to teach you to do better. And otherwise is to say, hey, you're, kind of screwing everybody else. It's a delicate approach, but always try and keep it on your radar and be ready to have those conversations.
I agree, yes. Now, do you get 50% up front when you're working with, say, a client you've never worked with before?
Everybody has a different deal. I've had some people offer to make a deposit, and I say, sure, that'd be great. And others say, it's going to be weeks before, the payroll goes out. And others say, yep, you'll be getting cash that night, and it's like, oh, great.
Right.
It's everybody's different. If I was working for one company all the time, I'd know what I'd get all the time.
I worked with a client recently, and yeah, it's net 60. So you got to know those things.
It's a bit of a stretch. I try not to overextend myself. I don't live check to check.
Right.
I don't live a lush, extravagant lifestyle. I don't have a yacht and a summer home and all those things. I make a living doing what I enjoy, and I supplement it with, like I said, I make a living with microphones. So some days I'm a voice actor, saying really, really fun stuff like equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Right.
Right. It's not like someone shouting Sega, but it does the job. I don't pursue it like I used to, because everybody with a USB mic and a laptop in their dorm room is calling themselves a voice actor.
Right.
Just like how cameras became more accessible. Now there's more people being videographers. Voiceovers became so accessible. More people are all saying they're voice actors. Now I kind of sometimes worry about all the consumer grade products or prosumer. They have some features that professional sound mixer devices have, but are at a better price point. We are starting to get people who are buying devices and saying, "Hey, I'm ready to jump in as your mixer on a production," and they'll have a steep learning curve, or they'll maybe be undercutting a professional. Again, another, opportunity to educate them, or to say, hey, I'm so glad you're learning to do this. Be ready to keep investing and make your kit better and do what you can. There's perspectives that I have and that, that I have to keep flexible, but, we're all in this together, I guess.
That's right. Now, what are some common rookie problems that you see over and over again?
Just inadequate experience, hands-on experience. If they're coming right from the classroom and they only had a couple of weeks of classes on sound and, they hit record and cross their fingers and aren't ready and flexible with the experience and contingencies, having backups. If I show up having redundancies available, that you're only as good as your backup kit is an expression I've heard and can live by that. If for some reason Unit A fails, I have a Unit B. If, just like the power supplies on my mixer, if one battery goes down, another one switches and takes over, just to have that confidence to be ready, to show up with, a little more than you need, having extra tools in your kit.
How has the business changed since you got started?
I would have to say the influx of prosumer products and more people getting into the field, getting affordable gear and jumping in. And a lot of people are filmmakers now. They bought equipment on Amazon and they, write a little script and start doing stuff. It's more prevalent, I guess.
If some of our listeners wanted to get into location sound, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, the one thing I would recommend is doing research, that you school yourself as much as possible. Yes, there's zillions of videos on YouTube you can also watch, but it's good to have the building blocks, the textbook examples of things. The information is out there. You can, of course, read what product manufacturers put out, and of course they'll tell you their product is the best at doing the job you want to do. But people recommend, what's a good mic for voiceover? And I say, well, what's a good shoe? I can recommend a really good shoe, but is it going to be right for you? I don't know. You haven't tried it on. You haven't walked around in it.
All right. Well, as we kind of wrap things up today, is there any final words of wisdom that you can share with the people out in the industry?
Whether you're just getting started or you've been doing this a while, you have to love what you do. The challenges you're going to face will, seem insurmountable at times. But again, see them all as an opportunity to learn. If you start thinking you know it all and you have all the answers and you start saying things like, well, this is the way it's always been done, you might be in trouble because things are changing. Be ready for that. That preparedness will serve you well.
Well, Carl, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today and talk a little bit about your experience. And if anybody's ever interested in connecting with Carl, what's the best way to do that?
You can follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. My name is Carl Welden, CarlWelden. And I look forward to connecting with you out there.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcasts and iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.